I'm having a chat with Finland. I am speaking with Finnish pianist Erik T. Tawaststjerna. We're going to talk about his Alba Records release. And and I mean really provocative CD you have produced here, and I mean in the best possible ways. I'm very, very impressed. What a great idea, this program that you've put together on this Alba Records release. It's called Ballads and Other Stories. And you make wonderful arguments and discussions because you're scholarly, of course, and you come from a great scholarly family, but such wonderful discussion because this CD has contemporary Finnish composers, very interesting piano music, and the four Chopin ballades for a very, very deliberate and important reason. And I want you to try and chat at me about that. Let's just do a little, if you don't mind, please, Erik. I need to give a little bit of background, and then we'll try and get going here. You are the son of the famous musicologist, may I say, your father, Erik W., who wrote the definitive biography of Sibelius. And I find it interesting that you have also recorded all of Sibelius's piano music, and I'm going to ask you about how much pressure you were under, perhaps, from your father. Let's see. You teach at the Sibelius. Are you still at the Sibelius Academy in Finland, in
Yes,
Helsinki?
I'm Professor Emeritus, so
See.
I don't have the professor's job and obligations anymore, but I teach several students.
That's marvelous, and you get a paycheck. I believe emeriti.
Something.
So you are emeritus professor at Sibelius Academy in Helsinki. How incredibly appropriate. But here's what just knocked my jaw dropped to the floor, and I had to reassemble it when I saw that you gave the first performance, the world premiere in Finland,
Yes, in Finland.
of Leonard Bernstein's Age of Anxiety Symphony Number Two, and people know that I'm a conductor. I studied that score for years and years and years, and dreamt about conducting it. But of course, it's a beast. So I said,
But
"Would you?"
it's a wonderful work. I think I
Oh,
love it so much. It's really beautiful.
incredible!
And
So
unfortunately, it's not played that often, at least
no,
not here in Europe. I don't know about the
no,
States.
not in America either. Of course, it's so difficult.
Yeah,
It's
it's one
very,
of the
very,
things.
very difficult. Anyway, so that really impresses me, and what it speaks to is this CD, because you have mixed your capacities as a brilliant pianistic mind in terms of interpretation and preparation of contemporary music. And these Finnish composers we'll mention in just a second, fabulous. And of course, there's reason why you have these skills. And then your approach to Chopin, I find very, very interesting. You mentioned kind of why I'm talking about this improvisatory nature. Am I far off?
Oh, it's right. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
and we'll go there. Let me just discuss the program on this CD, and I'm going to turn to you frantically in terms of some pronunciation of some of these Finnish composers, but we have help. The second sonata, the Fire Sermon. And again, remember the whole point is narrative, narrative, narrative. What
Hmm,
amazing
hmm.
is of Rautavaara. Can you give me the first name, please? I can't pronounce it.
Eino Juhani.
No wonder. And I'm not even trying. Eyo Ioanni
Eino
Rautavaara,
Juhani.
something like that.
Yeah.
The sonata number two, the Fire Sermon, amazing. Magnus Lindeberg, I can do that.
Well,
Piano Jubilees, two of his, I think, six or seven Piano Jubilees.
six, six
Six,
judges.
two,
Yeah.
number six and number three from the year
Mhm.
2000. By the way, the Rautavaara sonata is from 1970. Um, Kaya Sariaho,
Yes.
close enough, I suppose.
Yeah.
Another wonderful piano ballad from 2005. Again, very contemporary, very interesting
Written
music.
for Emmanuel X, by the way. Dedicated
Yes,
to Emmanuel X.
I read that. Yeah,
Yes.
commissioned by and dedicated and performed
I
by
would
Emmanuel.
love to hear his interpretation, but I don't think he has ever recorded it.
Interesting,
Yeah.
interesting. Matthew Withall sounds English.
A Canadian.
Canadian, aha,
Yeah.
from Leaves of Grass, 12 Preludes for Piano after Walt Whitman. And again, the whole point of this CD that you're going to discuss with us is narrative, 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 even in the ballades of Chopin. And I want you to discuss this business about Chopin didn't want to be associated with any particular narratives, although his music is very narrative. Whereas these Finnish composers. I'm thinking of help. Who'd I forget? Well, with all the Canadian in this case, but these from the Leaves of Grass,
Yes.
Preludes after Walt Whitman, to very specific poems are referenced very colorfully in his music. So there you go. That gives, but just as I mentioned to you off camera, I'm going to make a little joke just to kind of launch this. I'm saying to myself, as I had my own epiphanies and revelations that we're going to get to about why you did certain things, how dare you? You have some nerve putting this program together because you have very deliberately kept the four ballades of Chopin apart from one another. And by the end of listening, I feel I have heard Chopin in an entirely different manner. Can you begin from that huge expository statement and question?
Well, I'm happy to hear your comment because that was exactly my purpose, that one would get a new perspective on Chopin and also on the contemporary pieces. For a long time, I had planned to play all the Chopin four ballades, like many pianists do, but I felt that they should not be played as a kind of suite or mega sonata. Chopin certainly did not have that in mind when he composed those four ballades. I think they somehow actually almost destroy each other in a dramatic sense. There's too much drama put together if you play them right after each other. So I thought that it's a better idea to put something in between and something very different, like contemporary ballads or narrative pieces. And when I played that in a concert hall, the audience gave me very good feedback on this idea that it really feels different when you hear Chopin after hearing some contemporary music at first. So I think it worked well, and I'm very happy with if you agree with me that this is.
I do agree indeed, and I want to make sure everyone is clear. You remember there are many professionals watching this interview. Fascinating CD just for the Finnish repertoire. You know,
Well,
to add to pianists' repertoire, amazing stuff. But help, I kind of forgot my train of thought. It's just that your program is not just to cause trouble. It's to help us understand this whole idea of narrative and imagery in music. It's very hard to put your finger on. Yeah.
I hoped, and I think it's partly achieved here, that the pieces sound even better than they usually sound because you hear them with fresh ears somehow after hearing the other kind of music.
That was what I took away actually, and that's when I thought, oh, yes, he succeeded here because you mentioned the narrative quality of these ballades, and that ballades in general are narratives or storytelling. But I just never, kind of took the time, or nor did I have my ears sort of transmogrified or something by these contemporary pieces together with the Chopin. So that but you come from this incredibly musical family. Did you secretly want to become a dentist or anything? Was it okay?
If anything, a diplomat maybe, if anything. But I never had any other career plans. Music was it. It really was important for me from the beginning.
Yeah.
But it's true, of course, that my father, who was a musicologist and pianist, who, by the way, got some lessons from Alfred Cortot and Heinrich Neuhaus.
Wow.
So he knew something about piano playing himself, but because of the war years, the World War, he did not achieve what he wanted in piano playing. So he switched to writing, and then he wrote this enormous biography. It took him 30 years to write it.
And it is the definitive biography of Sibelius, I think, still, yeah?
Thank you for saying that. But of course, there have been some books now recently published which give some additional information.
Yeah.
But I think it's true that my father's book is a kind of classic
There you go.
biography of Sibelius.
So coming from that kind of thing, I adjusted a little bit earlier with you. Your father has written, certainly as you were a child, the definitive history, the thing that props the doors open. This huge volume I'm imagining in my mind of Sibelius history, and then son of a gun. His son, at a certain point in his life, Erik, you record the complete piano music of Sibelius. Tell me, was there pressure?
Well, it was a very interesting project, and I really felt drawn to it. Uh, I did not know all the pieces. As you know, Sibelius composed more than 100 piano pieces, and very few people know them all. Glenn Gould recorded a few, but only very few. Then I was very drawn to them, and it was a very interesting project for me when I was about 30 years old. Well, it took me about 8 years to complete the project. And then I had the choice, should I remain a Sibelius pianist all my life and play only Sibelius, which I could have done very well. There are some people who do this. But I thought that maybe it's more interesting to go to other projects than I have played, as you said, Bernstein and Chopin and contemporary music. I feel that the repertoire is so wide and so rich, so I didn't want to limit myself to Sibelius. I had already seen how my father spent most of his lifetime with Sibelius. So I did not want to replicate that experience anymore in the second generation.
Very interesting. And also, it takes a certain affinity, I think, in intellectual and otherwise, let alone technique and so on, to enjoy and decipher contemporary music, as you have done so beautifully with these Finnish composers on this CD. So, you're drawn, I think, yeah? It's not
Well,
just about, well, I want diversity in my repertoire. It's like you are attracted, I think, from what I hear.
I certainly don't consider myself a specialist on contemporary music. I know, again, I mean, we all know pianists who specialize in that. But no, for me, it's one branch of repertoire, and it's a very interesting and rewarding branch. But I love to play Chopin, I love to play Schubert, love to play Beethoven, all the classical composers.
Okay, I'll leave you alone on that one. Uh, I think what I love so much is your very precise album title,
Mm.
Ballades and Other Stories. And I love your choice of that word stories. And we've been using the word narrative several times, but really this is a kind of consciousness raising all by itself to help public and professional musicians and so on understand stories hidden in this music, the music of Chopin and others. Hang on, let's see. So especially about the order of the music on the program. Anything about how you decided to order these composers and Chopin sandwich them
Well,
all?
how to say, the contemporary pieces are more or less in chronological order between themselves. Rautavaara is he passed away a few years ago, and his sonata is from 1970, and all the other pieces are later.
Yeah.
And more or less, I think I wanted to have the kind of feeling of progress of music history, so that the Rautavaara is not actually that modernistic in its language. It's rather still it has kind of even romantic sounds in itself. Whereas Magnus Lindberg, of course, is much more contemporary. Kaija Saariaho also, and Matthew Whitall is kind of post-impressionistic. So I think it was a good order to put them in. And Chopin, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4. I did not want to change that order, the four ballads of Chopin, but they are also in chronological order.
Yes.
So
Well, at first I had that.
this order is chronological.
I mean, at first I had that question about playing the four Chopin together, boom, 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 boom. But by the end of my listening experience, I knew perfectly well. I mean, there is no reshuffling at all with those four. That the number four is that is like and it ends the CD. That alone essentially says, now see what you've learned, something like that. So the order is wonderful. Am I crazy? And I might, or stupid, but I hear, especially in these Finnish composers, and you mentioned it in one particular piece. I forgot. Maybe it's Matthew Whittall's piece. But is there a lot of this technique of, you know what I mean, where you of pedal suspension so that you can get the overtones? Is that written in, or is that kind of a technique of your playing? Can you be a little specific, since I'm not?
Well, in Matthew Whitall, it is very much part of his
You mentioned,
expression.
yeah,
Yes, it's as I said, it's post-impressionistic.
yeah.
So there is this kind of very rich use of pedal. I think it is part of the language there. Maybe and also in Kaija Saariaho, she has actually indicated very long pedals. She, I think, even wrote that much pedal is to be used here all the time.
That's why I asked. Yeah, I was so
Yeah,
curious because it's
yeah.
such a great. It's in a way it almost in terms of these Finnish composers. I hope I didn't interrupt your thought. Please
Mm,
continue in a second. But I came away thinking, maybe there's something about the days of darkness or something. I mean, the echoes in the dark night. I don't know, but it seemed very much that I was hearing this technique in Finnish music. Now straighten me out here.
well, I never thought about that, but it's an interesting thought. Thank you.
But am I close or just completely off? I mean, there are moments where there are these suspended, overtones and so on in other pieces of the program. I just wondered if it.
Well, maybe it's, yeah, it's possible. Of course, there are other, like French contemporary music also uses
Yeah,
lots of pedal at
lots of
times.
them.
It's not only Finnish contemporary music,
But
but
I meant that idea of deliberately achieving those overtones and giving an audience an opportunity to hear those overtones. You know
yes.
what I'm trying to say? Can't really describe the technique. I'm not a good pianist, but that's why I asked.
Well, but of course, it's something that I'm personally very interested in. So I'm happy if you caught it
I
somehow. If
loved
you,
it.
yeah.
It's a magical color,
Mhm.
just
Well,
if nothing else. You know, this idea of you're hearing on two or three planes,
yeah,
in a
yeah.
way, on two or three levels. Occasionally, it's not prevalent, but just this quality, especially at the end of some pieces, those harmonics seemed
Mhm.
to just be fascinating.
I mean, piano is a percussion instrument, but it should have magic in its sound, and this is one of the ways to do
Yeah.
it.
So sometimes these effects, I don't want to belabor it, but are indicated as you mentioned in the
Mhm.
Woodall piece.
Yeah.
But other moments that I heard this quality, wonderful quality of color, is kind of your own thing as opposed to specific instructions. Bravo.
Well, yeah.
Bravo. Blew my brains out. I loved it. I thought it was just great. And it's almost like having insight, if you get my
Mhm.
drift. Hearing things and helping us to hear things that
Mhm.
other interpreters have not
Mhm.
maybe.
I remember somebody once saying that Walter Gieseking, the great German pianist,
Yes.
was listening to overtones in his playing, and I never thought about it until now that you mentioned this specifically.
Very interesting. Wow. Oh, I'm so glad I got one good question in there. Um, let's talk a little bit about the Whitall uh, pieces because they are so specific, and I don't know if you can kind of bring us full circle from such specificity in narrative. I'm speaking of from his 12 Preludes, Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman, fabulous number 6 from 2005, On the Beach at Night. I read the poem.
Hmm.
The poem is there. I mean, is there. And also number 7 from 2009, A Noiseless Patient Spider, one of the most famous of Whitman's poems.
Yes. Well, these are the only pieces which have a specific program or
Yeah.
poem behind them. And I think he catches the atmosphere beautifully. I happen to know him also personally,
Ah,
and he's a wonderful person and a great, very, very talented composer. And well, it's more or less there. The composition gives you all the tools as a pianist. You can create the colors and the reverberations wonderfully. So I think they are great music.
let's talk a little bit about the 2005 ballad of Sariaho. This is a woman composer?
Yes.
Kaya, I'll take that chance. Written for Emanuel Ax.
Hmm.
Apparently, you might have the only recording of this piece so far,
Hmm.
as we can tell. Rap on wood. How hard was it? Because it's a big beast.
It's very difficult. I must say, she's not mainly a piano composer. She composes usually for orchestra or for, I mean, she has created operas.
You mentioned yes in your program.
Piano is maybe not her instrument specifically. So some of the figurations are quite tricky. You can't imagine how difficult they are. And I think she has put down a duration, a suggested duration for the piece, which is something like 4 minutes, which is absurd. It would be impossible to play it in that speed. So I think I don't know why. Usually when composers put the speed, suggested speed, they are not always correct.
You know, that's very interesting because we've without making any judgment, we've really discovered and stumbled upon this idea of composers who sometimes are not aware of the technique of the
Yes.
piano, for example, that they're writing for. Yeah. So,
Already, Beethoven already had metronome markings, which are practically impossible to play.
and we'll not go there on this talk because I'm a nut about that whole
Uh,
that whole discussion. We'll speak about it later. Uh, let's see, what else do I want to talk about? Let's see. Well, did so we have these two very specific, and at the end of the CD, two very, very specific. This is about what kind of is so enchanting, and I almost said entrapful, in that you do the math you with all two pieces that are very, very descriptive, and then you give us the number 4 ballade of Chopin to end the
mhm.
evening, the CD, if I'm not mistaken. And that's what we've been talking about, really. I mean, to hear the number 4 after these other works, it's just like I've never heard the piece before in my life. And do you play these Chopin pieces in a more improvisatory manner, if you will, more free? No, getting rid of bar lines and so on. I mean, give me your approach to Chopin and these 4 ballades, would you?
Well, there is an element of improvisation. On the other hand, Chopin admired Bach very much, and there is much polyphony in Chopin's writing. So, I mean, yes, improvisation, but on the other hand, you have to understand the polyphony and the control of harmony and lines. So it's a mixture of these two elements.
Because you mentioned the ballades as being somewhat improvisatory in nature, and it hadn't occurred to me before listening to your interpretation of the 4, and that's why I thought I was hearing, and support me on this or not, just a little freer flow of movement that changed in many ways, the whole character of each of
Mm.
these ballades, gave them a much more narrative capacity. How's that?
Well, I'm happy to hear it like that because that was my aim. Of course, I mean, we know that the ballads have been recorded probably 150 times already, so it's difficult to say something that nobody has ever said about these pieces. But I of course, hope that I try to put my personal view on this CD, and I hope it has reached some listeners.
Thank you very much for what you have just said, because that is exactly my takeaway, again, of your performance of the ballades. Imagine how many times I've heard them over the past, whatever, 50 years or so, and critically, and that's what just jumped out at me. I had never heard the ballades in this manner. Little subtle things. I don't know, little even, I don't know, just the care with which you allow the pieces to meander even a little bit into different, as you know, these ballades and storytelling have episodes and scenes and so on. That's really what got me. What have I forgotten to ask you? I'm looking through here. We could discuss these pieces. I love for example, let me get back to the Rothavara, the Sonata Number 2, Fire Sermon, composed in 1970, the earliest piece on this recording. You want to give me anything? I mean, talk about imagery. It's amazing, that flickering kind of almost say busy bee figure in the beginning and so on. Give me a
I
little overview.
enough to know Rautavaara personally.
Yeah.
I, I met him several times, and he was a wonderful, imaginative, almost demonic character. There was always something very special even when he was speaking,
Mm.
and so I try to catch that kind of special, almost mystical atmosphere that is pervading his music very much. So, it, as you said, flickering, almost like the symbol of evil and the symbol of uh, virtue battling each other. That was, I think, that's the idea of this sonata.
And the slow movement, the andante, is a real ballad in the Chopinesque
Yes,
manner, as were my thoughts, fluid and flowing, beautiful,
big,
wistful.
big clusters with the
And,
forearm in the middle.
and then the allegro brutale. I
Yeah,
mean, just like there's this one little annoying one finger tune that drives me crazy, a little fugato
Bach.
that
Bach.
is, yes, you took the initials right out of my mouth, but yeah, wonderful. I think that's about it. Go ahead. Let's. What's going on? Are you up to anything like the complete recordings of piano music of somebody else?
Well, I have to think about this. Was a big project for me, so I am now planning something, but it's too early to reveal it now.
Ah,
But
too early to reveal. I see.
I have some wonderful students, and I
Ah,
enjoy teaching still very much. So this is at the moment I practice a little bit, and then I teach, and life is wonderful.
I was just gonna, you just spoke to. I'm 71, and I'm reaching that age where I do a little, I relax, I do a little more, I take my own schedule, and I'm continue to be amazed at people who are on that treadmill of rapid career progress. It's just such energy. I'm too old for that these days. We have had a wonderful talk. It's getting late in Finland. Erik T. Tawaststjerna. I hope I was close. Thank you. His Alba Records releases is all going to be up on performingartsreview.net with links to buy the CD. And so, what an incredible CD just of the works of Finnish composers for pianist professionals to have a look at and put in their collection and consider learning. But we have 4 Chopin ballades, as you out there, all of you may never have quite heard them before. There's something very magical about the way you play these 4 Chopin ballades and your idea of putting them between other contemporary works and then ending with the number 4 Chopin ballade. It's such a terrific, such a terrific idea, and very scholarly in the most positive way, because we come away having picked up stuff we hadn't ever picked up before. How to interpret interpret Chopin in a kind of different and unique way, and then these wonderful composers, Magnus Lindberg, here I go again, Koya Sariaho, Matthew Whittle, there's an easy one, those good Canadian names. Who have I forgotten? Oh yes, Rotavara, Sonata number 2. I'm a little leery, and again, still of the first name. Very fascinating language, really, and so on. May I just thank you, Erik, for the time, for staying up late tonight so that we can have this conversation. Brilliant CD. Can't wait to find the time here in the next couple of weeks I'm going to put this up right away at the video interview so it can go up. You'll have your page all set, and then as everybody knows, I have to catch up on the written reviews, but I can't wait to chow into this one.
Thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure.
Thanks very much indeed. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.